What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the YouTube channel where it's me, your boy Soul Blaze, back at it again with another special episode of Wine Swirlix, where me, as the LC connoisseur, swirls my fancy wine, talk about Pokemon from the Little Cup format, and especially how they work in Draft League. Woo! Today we have a very special episode. We're doing Yamask and Galarian Yamask, as you can see on your screen and in the title and on the thumbnail, in one episode. So if you are hyped for this episode of Wine Swirlix, then please, man, make sure you are subscribed down below. It takes 2 seconds to check it out, and it really helps me support my content. It goes a long way. So I would really appreciate if you could just check that real quick for me so we could build this community for LC. Ooh, I'm on today. Okay, so let's just get straight into it. We're going to do Yamask first, and then we're going to do Galarian Yamask after. So settle down, grab a snack, and let's get right into that business. Yamask. Okay, so the reason I'm doing both of them, they're kind of similar than most other Pokemon. There are some Pokemon that have very distinctly different regional forms than their own. Case in point, I'd say that, for example, the Zigzagoons are very different in how they behave. I'd also kind of go to say that the Ponytas, for example, are incredibly different in how they behave. And then you have some more similar ones like the Slowpokes, the Rattatas, and stuff like that. Meowths are also incredibly different. So for the ones that are more similar, I might just consider doing them as one. I might not always do that, but we're doing that for this episode right here. So, Yamask, Pure Ghost. Obviously, Pure Ghost has its ups and it has its downs. You have immunity to the best stab in the game. Apart from Scrappy, there are some Scrappy users, so you got to be careful of those. But you also have a weakness into the best, I should say, coverage move in the game, which is Knockoff. And when the best item in the game is Eviolite and you're weak to it, you don't want to tank it when it's stab, and you don't want to tank it when it's coverage. You just don't want to tank knockoffs. So having some knockoff switches on your team could definitely help you, or Yamask. Both of Yamasks thrive for that matter because they're both weak to it. So just keep that in mind. Yamask from the Unova region has a couple things going for it that the other one does not. This Yamask, I would say, is more consistent. Like, it has some sets that have really good consistency, but that's kind of like you're gonna want to run those sets. Like for the other one, it has more like higher peaks, but it has better goods, but it has worse bads. It's a little bit more polarizing than Yamask. So if you're looking for consistency, I would say drop this one, and it's only because despite being a special attacker, it does get knockoff itself, and you know how we feel about knockoff, don't you? Now by now, baby. Knockoff is incredible. Obviously, you got Thief and Poltergeist as well, which are item related. Obviously, you don't want to run Poltergeist and Knockoff kind of together. Or if you do, then at least make sure that you don't Poltergeist when they don't have an item, because then it becomes useless. So just keep that in mind. But it is a special attacker, so we're mostly going to be talking about the status pool and the special pool. Hex is probably the best special move it has, just because its ability to set up Toxic Spikes and spread status with Will-O-Wisp into Hex or Toxic Spikes into Hex, which is really good. You can also, through your ability Mummy, which transfers on contact and replaces other abilities as it does that, you can actually nullify Guts users when they hit you with the juicy knockoff, so at least you get a big trade-in for it. So if you stand in front of, say, something like a Timber, and it has Guts, it knocks you off, gets the Mummy to replace its Guts, is now vulnerable to getting Will-O-Wisp into Hex. So that's definitely something you can do. I'd also be sure to mention that you can definitely do Curse on this thing. Curse is not a move that I have put on here, but I definitely want to make sure that you guys know about Curse. Because if you choose Yamask to be your Terra Captain, I mean, it's a rare case you would do that. But if you do decide to do that, it does have some options. You could definitely, like, Infestation, Ghost-type Curse, and trap them and just do insane amounts of damage and just get rid of a check like that. Or you could also kind of use the other curse variant, which we'll get back to later, which is more relevant for the other Yamask, which because it's physical, we'll get back to that. But you kind of like curse is a multi-purpose move that you definitely can drag some usage out of that I have not listed on here that I definitely would recommend you guys check out and test a little bit for yourselves. This is amazing at absorbing momentum. Coming in, it can trade its own life for something of more value with either Memento, just don't use it on Claire Body Mons or anything like that. It's amazing on simple Mons, for example. Or you could just Destiny Bond on contacts, you transfer Mummy, and then you could plan to kind of get Mummy back, but you also have to be worried that Mummy might also mess you up in return. That's kind of like why it has more. It's one of the things that separates the Yamasks a little bit. It's the ability how that works, because this Mummy, it kind of permanently replaces and it goes back and forth in being a double-edged sword, while the other one has a much higher peaks because you can actually steal opponents' abilities and utilize them for yourself. So not only do you replace guts or take away guts, but you take guts and you can start using guts for yourself, for example, which is pretty strong. So it's just things like that. You also have other options. You have decent coverage. You have Shadow Ball if you don't want to go the Hex route. If you want to go for something like Calm Mind or Nasty Plot non-Will-O-Wisp, you could definitely do that, or Nasty Plot non-Toxic Spikes. You could definitely do that. You can just run Shadow Ball. You don't have Terra Blast because you're not in the games, but you do have Energy Ball, which is good coverage for stuff. You have Psychic. You have Dark Pulse. You have Shockwave. And the occasional Ominous Wind if you're feeling frisky about that 10% chance, although I would advise you to not do that. But if you're staying in and spamming Ominous Wind, then maybe you could do something with it. You also have Haze to stop setup sweepers, because this thing is quite tanky, especially on the physical side, with access to stuff like Will-O-Wisp and Iron Defense, and you can just like Haze, stop a setup that would otherwise sweep you, or you could even Destiny Bond, take yourself down with the threat that's threatening your team, reset the situation, get back in the game, baby. Yamask is back on. So that's kind of how that works. It also has some sort of recovery with Pain Split. You can run Oranberry. And when I say Oranberry on this series, people, if your format, if your rule set in your draft league specifies that Berry Juice is legal, just don't mind Oranberry, okay? Just replace it with Berry Juice. That's why I have the graphic there, okay? Oranberry, if that's what's allowed, Berry Juice always over Oranberry if that's allowed. The only exception is maybe Phantump with Harvest. Maybe. It's like a couple, very few exceptions, but just keep that in mind. For the most part, we're talking Oranberry / Berry Juice. And Berry Juice is favored for the most part between those two, if you can afford it, or if you can run it legally. Obviously, I do believe that this thing can run some Life Orb 19 shenanigans. You have to EV that way, you become less tanky. But you could definitely do that if you want to go for a Nasty Plot. You might as well just try and go for like an insane offensive sweep with maybe some sort of either Nasty Plot or Trick Room or both. You could definitely do that. We'll get back into some sets later, but that's just some ideas for you. So that's the basic gist of Yamask. So let's get back into some sets on how you can run this thing. On the top left, I have the most standard set you'll find on this thing, which is going to be defense, or kind of like a mix, like a bulky attacker. It's going to be put a lot into HP to make up for the low stat value of it. So you get a lot out of putting things into HP. Then you have knockoff, and you have a lot of viability, as you can see. You can put Grudge on this. You can put Memento, Destiny Bond, Pain Split. Like, you could do a lot with that fourth slot. But I do believe knockoff, Will-O-Wisp, Hex, T-Spikes are the most 4 common moves on this thing. Just so you guys are aware of that. You could do a Status Absorber variant with Resto Chesto and save your Eviolite for something else. You could definitely do that. You can run Calm Mind variants, Nasty Paw variants, with or without Hex. You can do with or without knockoff. You can do super tanky. You can do super offensive. But for the most part, the standard variation you're going to see is going to be on the top left. And it is going to be mostly working with Trick Room for the most part, because it is so slow. So I would recommend you guys looking into using Trick Room with this for yourselves. It's an amazing way of getting all of the part of momentum absorbing that this Pokemon does. And I would recommend you guys look into that. So you can also run a specific Trick Room set with this. Trick Room, Will-O-Wisp, Pex, Nasty Paw goes a long way. Again, doesn't have to be Nasty Paw. You can be Calm Mind, physically defensive. You can be... I put a little asterisk next to the EVs because they are a little bit wrong. I don't remember off the top of my head why, but I do believe that it's supposed to be some... I do think the defense spread on it is a little bit wrong, so I put an asterisk there. And then, obviously, you can also do the Trapper variant, which I talked to you guys about, which is Infestation. You can do Toxic, 2 layers of Toxic Spikes. You can knock off their item, trade your life for something else. Also, Curse is going on that set. You can also fit Curse on that set somehow. Maybe instead of, like, Hex, maybe stuff like that. And you can do a lot with Terra on this thing, too. You could definitely Terra into Dark or Fairy to resist the knockoff and become tankier and live longer and do more of the stuff that Yamask wants to do. You could Terra Grass if you're afraid of sleep. You could do Terra Water if you want bulky stats because water is a good defensive typing and you don't have to be weak to knockoff anymore. Or you want to resist some of the things that water does resist. You could do Poison to absorb poison toxic spikes yourself. And be weak to Psychic, which you would have super effective ghost moves for and stuff like that. So there are some things that you can use Terra on this thing for. I do recommend you guys maybe choose another Terra Captain, but it's definitely not the worst either. So it is, you can use it. I'm not gonna say it's unusable. So that is basically the gist of Yamask. So let's hop on right on over to the cousin from the UK, Yamask-Galar, baby. And of course, me, purple being my favorite color, I do have a slight preference for Yamask-Galar. So just keep in mind there might be some bias there, but the important thing about this is it's going to be physical instead of special, and it doesn't have knockoff when it's physical, which sucks a little bit because knockoff is obviously the greatest move in the game. So even if you're using a weak knockoff as a special attacker, it's still better than not having knockoff as a physical attacker, just so you guys know. So the move pool, I think the move pool is a little bit better for regular Yamask. But I've also forgotten to change the ability on this slide. As you can see, I will probably do that in edit. So it says the actual ability name. I will 100% do that. So it's going to say Wandering Spirit for you guys, but it's going to look a little bit off, like not regular, because I forgot to change it. So it's going to be Wandering Spirit, which is basically like a free skill swap. And when I talked about that one earlier, having a higher peak, is definitely that you can steal the opponent's abilities and use them for yourself. So you get stuff like Guts, and you can start running ham because you're a physical attacker, so you wouldn't mind a burn now, and you can just do considerable amounts of damage with EQ Poltergeist. And kind of not having knockoff also kind of works a little bit because you have Poltergeist and you don't want to remove items for Poltergeist damage, but obviously you would prefer to have knockoff over that. But it definitely does still do amazing amounts of damage on the physical side. And then you can also run Facade, and you can run Terra Normal with that if you want, or maybe Normal Gem and not be less weak to knock off. Again, I haven't listed Normal Gem as an item here on this because of that, but you have so many things you can do with items, which I've listed in the sets sections a lot more this time around, just because I feel like they are more niche than regular. But this the item select on these mons are a great opportunity for you to outplay your opponent. You can do everything from Normal Gem to Chesto Berry to Weakness Policy to specific Resist Berry to counter stuff. You can do Life Orb for offensive offbeat variants. You can do obviously slap an Eviolite on them if you want. You can do Assault Vest if you're running 4 attacks and you've used your Eviolite slots, and you still get the special defense benefit of Eviolite, and you can still do stuff with that for sure. But there are just a lot of things you can do with the item select here. You can also run Safety Goggles instead of Grass Terra if you're worried about that. Like, there are so many things you can do. Obviously, again, this can trade its life with Destiny Bond and Memento for something greater, which is always a great thing to have. You can also do Trick Flame Orb, for example. So you can do Flame Orb, Facade, trigger Guts with like trigger guts with the Wandering Spirit and then just go ham. You could definitely prepare for a situation like that. Payback is also going to do a lot of damage because you're going to go last a lot of the time. Again, Trick Room, I believe, is going to be wonderful on this. Or does it... I believe it gets Trick Room, right? Yeah, I'll make a cut here and come back with that. Yeah, just like I thought, it 100% gets Trick Room. So, for some reason, I've managed to delete that off the list here, but it does get a Trick Room, which I will show you in the sets at least. But for sure, Trick Room is a really good option for this as well. Obviously, you're going to go first a lot of the time with being in Trick Room, and that's going to be a very good thing to have. You can also run kind of special saucy variants of this, and it can also be a mixed attacker with just running Hex, Will-O-Wisp, or T-Spikes, for example. Hex or Earth Power are probably going to be your go-to special moves for mixing this thing up, so you don't just hit a physical wall and you can't move forward. Alongside, maybe if you Terra into something else and then you want to go for like a Dark Terra Dark Pulse or Grass Terra Energy Ball or Psychic Terra Psychic, but that's about it. You're going to be running physical attacks for the most part, so just keep that in mind, people. Just keep that in mind. So you still got the great things that you look for in Yamask. The difference is you don't trap with Infestation, you trap with Mean Look here, but it can still trap. Also, I think substitute variants on this with stuff like Curse, maybe. Non-Ghost Curse is going to be really good. I think Non-Ghost Curse is amazing on this. You're already slow, which gets them more amazing in Trick Room. You get even more physically tanky and possible to break for physical attackers. And you just do insane amounts of damage. You just have to worry about that special defense, which you can pack up with EVs and stuff like that. And you can also hold Eviolite to further boost that. So Yamask-Galar is just amazing, man. The thing about it is the typing is also a little bit more polarizing. It depends. Like, you add on 3 weaknesses, which is huge. I get that. I totally get that. That's a downside. But also, you're getting electric immunity, which is really good. You have a little bit more against electric spam, like Volt Switch, so they can't Volt Switch on you for free, which is huge. It can't get Thunder Waved, which is also really good. And it's going to just help out. That electric immunity is going to help out a lot for your team. So just keep that in mind. It's going to help your resist pool, like the resistances Ground bring, in terms of the immunity for electric and stuff like that, is going to not completely outweigh 3 weaknesses, which are super common, but it definitely helps pack this thing up a little bit. So it's actually very viable. So just keep that in mind. Over to the sets for Galarian Yamask. We have standard bulky offense, okay? There, again, you have so many options in terms of item select and in terms of how that affects your moveset. Already talked a little bit about Assault Vest if you have used your Eviolite slots, Normal Gem Facade, Normal Terra with Stealing Guts, for example, or maybe even Huge Power. And then if they burn you, Facade is just going to do amazing damage. Even you could do like Rock Terra on it for Rock Slide for that to do more damage. Or you can even do it in like Sand to get really specially defensive. It also gets Sandstorm for itself if you want to go that route. Will-O-Wisp as well, obviously going to shut down other physical attackers, and it still shuts down Guts users like the other Yamask, which is amazing. And then just Dual Stab. The fact that it has Dual Stab over 1 stab makes it a better offensive variant than regular Yamask. But regular Yamask is kind of more consistent with the fact that it can spread burns a little bit easier, I'd say. And it's also just more punishing because it has a move that combines really well with Will-O-Wisp and Hex. And that's kind of the reason why. You know? So that's kind of part of it. But there are so many things you can do with this. And I've listed some here. So feel free to pause the video and steal the sets for yourself to use. And maybe even just take inspiration from this. Like you take this thing from that set and that thing from this set. And you kind of just like concoct a really crazy creative set that you can go ham with. I definitely advise you to experiment. That's the best way of learning this game. There are so many things and aspects of this game and this format that you have to get familiar with if you want to get really good. And it's just better to concoct something that goes horribly wrong and you learn from that than to just not try to experiment whatsoever. I definitely, it's definitely a mindset thing in that regard. So definitely want you guys to take care of that aspect a little bit. So this thing definitely requires a little bit more brain power in terms of getting going with like tearing away from Ghost, as you can see on the curse set down right, or mixing in with specials you don't get confronted by physical walls like in Tanky for Days and stuff like that. But it's definitely a lot of options that you have for this thing, and it's kind of amazing the fact that a Ghost Ground can be tanky, and it can also be a setup sweeper. It can just be momentum absorber, status absorber. It can do so many different things on a team that you wouldn't think it can do, and you would probably just expect this to be like the Volt Switch, swap in and then go for a Will-O-Wisp, but it does so much more than that. So I really want you guys to look into it, especially when you notice the kind of damage it can output from out of the pure blue skies almost. So definitely keep that in mind, people. The final rating for both Yamasks, spoiler alert, is going to be the same ranking. We're going to put them in C. They are not that different. They are different. We kind of explored that, right? But they are not so different that they actually deserve a different point rating. They just have diverse strengths and weaknesses that kind of make up for each other's value. So, for example, the consistency of your masks perfectly matches up with the kind of offensive utility that a second typing brings and the second resist pool, while also bringing the weaknesses and how the ability is a little better but the move pool is a little worse kind of thing. So they do have their differences, but I definitely recommend you guys pick up one of these low tier ghosts if you want to kind of spread some havoc with defensive utility and defensive and offensive utility in some slow bulky offense. So definitely look into Yamask if that's something for you. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Swirlix. I really appreciate the support on these videos. I've been hearing comments about how they're helpful and how people like watching them to learn stuff, and that makes me really happy. I really appreciate that. That's what this series and what kind of my philosophy is with running a draft league myself and doing all that stuff. So I really appreciate the support, people. I really do. So comment down below who you want to see next, and I'll see you guys in the next video. This has been your boy Soulblaze, and as always, take care of your families, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next video or Twitch stream or whatever content I produce next. Peace.